Okay, so to round out the week, we want to start to ask you to join in the conversation. So we're not here to give answers so much, but to talk about what the discoveries of the week were. So first of all, I've been amazed and delighted by what's happened this week. And we've seen both some very scary things and some wildly optimistic things working on tiny scales, microbiome, people talking about technospheres at a global scale. And it seems collectively there's a kind of optimism within the school that architects can find something useful and credible to do now that will help us step more lightly on the earth. There are a number of dialogues, I think, that have emerged. So if I take one that kind of really interested me was the relationship between vast networks of very tiny things, the kind of microbiology of geography, if I can put it like that. That's rather a clumsy way to put it, but microbiology is the super tiny, but has profound effects. And there are a number of people this week who've been interested and started to engage with that. And I'm going to ask each one of you to identify one kind of theme or something you noticed in the week that we, as an AA kind of emerging consciousness, are beginning to be sensitive to.
That's an easy question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think one of the patterns that I noticed was that people spent a bit of time this week playing with new tools. We just had talk about thinking about cities as systems. I think we had people showing new materials that they were developing and working with. And so I think it's been an interesting opportunity to say, in order to kind of address issues of climate change, we have to use new tools. And then it was really exciting to see people then use those new tools to manifest as new objects. So the recycled objects that we have in the room with us, and the student interventions to projects in Venice from the first years. So that's the thing that I've noticed.
My realization is quite connected to yours. There are definitely lots of new tools that have been introduced, but I think I was very happy to see how we as kind of people at the AA really can tackle on new things really quite courageously. I think the confidence that architectural education tries to embed in us to go on to new adventures is very something that resonated throughout the week for me. I think architects have a really big power in visualizing and communicating data to people, and that's something that I hope will be a bit more even kind of put forward. Yeah.
For me, what was quite amazing was that, I'm sure we all kind of know how interdisciplinary, not only written but also we can see that the school, by all means, is quite interdisciplinary. And then the talks throughout the week were not only by architects. And then that was quite good to watch, because that's when I personally feel that I'm equipped to go out in a certain years. And that was quite strong about this week in my observation. We had a very fascinating talk by someone who identified himself as a builder, but earth builder, and then architects also, a physicist. And then it's just, that was quite amazing, I think.
I must confess I missed most of the week, so... But being excited about what I've heard and what I've seen and what I've read out of it, it was so inspiring to see two sets of approaches to understand complex systems, being climate, cities, settlements, talking about probabilities, likelihood, adaptability, or let's say entropy and game theory in order to decipher or model or simulate a specific type of environment. And at the same time having critical reading, critical histories, imaginative approach, and also enabling collective imaginaries and memories in order to reflect on a specific form of complexity and built environment. This actually might come from an interesting but at the same time challenging misconception of two interchangeable words, city and urbanization. As the two, we use them interchangeably, but we were discussing it in one of the classes actually with some of you that they are both coming from Latin roots, urbe and civitas. Urbe is a connection between the fragmented parts. So that's why when we talk about systems, we talk about complexity, entropy, all those things relates to the urban. But civitas is actually shared values among the people, which makes communities. So perhaps, I think, somehow we misuse these two words with each other. And somehow we try to decipher something which is based on value system that are social, political, and less about, let's say, statistics, economic calculation, or let's say, mathematical formats and formulas. So that's kind of, for me, was the summary, and at the same time, some sort of confusion that I'm left with at the end of this week.
Yeah, also from that, like throughout the week, we were looking at different connectivities, different networks from global scale to space to the city itself. But what intrigued me the most about this week was the use of space within AA throughout the week, because in the preparation of this week, we were constantly thinking about where should which event take space in, or apart from the lectures that are already determined, where each unit will sort of locate itself and how that will be communicated throughout the other community of the school. And it was great to see how throughout the week we would constantly bump into each other and ask each other, like, where is this taking place? Where is the earth building taking place? Where is the dye workshop taking place? And I think this sort of opening up all the doors in AA, I mean, it was mostly 36, but still, like, running into people, bumping into people, constantly working on something collaboratively, connection between each unit. I think this sort of little hyperlocalized network within AA is also a great model that we can connect to what we discussed in many of the lectures and seminars here.
Okay, that's fine. No, you have to do it on the phone, otherwise the people at home can't tell.
Maybe I can just add another thing. Yeah, I think one element I really enjoyed throughout the whole week is just to talk about value systems and how we engage with value systems and what we put what imbue value on. And even there's these questions about where is the agency of the architect, and where is the agency of the architect? And I think this week we've really been talking about the agency of the architect and understanding value systems, or reinterpreting them, which has been super interesting. And also the immersive dialogues that we've had with people from all across AA, and even Hook Park. Yeah.
Okay, so do you want me to get controversial? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get controversial. And I'm going to say that it was a good week, but I don't think we went far enough. I think our explorations of property and how that relates to climate change, we need to follow the money. And I think some of the early stage calculations where people were comparing materials in terms of carbon, that's great for a bit, but we need to look at the whole. And I think some of the other work that, for example, I'm going to call out Hook Park, is doing with timber, I don't think goes far enough. That place has got clay, it has water on it. So I think those also need to become part of the palette of tools that they're using. So I'm kind of saying, does anyone want to say things we should have gone further with?
Yeah. I think our initial aim as Student Forum to help out with this week was to form a relevancy where sometimes you lack with data. And especially if you're not professionally interested, it's very hard to form a relationship with data and graphs, as we talked about in yesterday's discussion as well. So, and like Selin said about the interconnectivity, so I think this interconnectivity that we can hopefully create further at the AA will help all of us feel much more relevant to subjects that are discussed on the TV mainly. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, the space between what you two are saying. Architecture hasn't gone far enough. But on the positive thing for this week, there's, I think, an emerging sensitivity that architecture is not a contained professional discipline that's only about the production of buildings. So that's the most positive thing, that we're starting to learn how to talk to other people and begin to understand other ways of measuring and observing the world. And as someone who isn't very good at maths, the first thing that I would observe, or ask you to observe, that they're the same, the people who like it and are really good at it, the same people as you. They watch the same movies, eat the same food, wear the same clothes, and they have the same dreams for a better world and a better society. And when I was taught here a very long time ago, architecture was a completely contained world. It didn't talk to anything or anyone who wasn't another architect. And the production of books of architecture, we produce more books than any other discipline in the world. And nobody can read them except architects. I mean, you must have all taken one home, shown your mum or your auntie, and you've seen them look at one page and then push it to the side. So a big encouragement is to, I think, this new sensitivity that there are other things other than rearranging the objects of architectural history, which was a kind of total preoccupation when I was a student, that everything had existed before, everything was solved. There was a kind of catalogue of what was supposed to be good architecture in various different, mainly in the West. They sort of ignored the East. And there was a very orthodox history that Greece, Rome, 1,000 Years of Darkness, Paris, London, USA, and the buildings were scattered through that. And I don't think anyone, even in first year now, would be satisfied with that kind of approach. Yeah, we haven't gone far enough, and there's a long way to go, but I do feel there is a start.
I don't want to particularly be controversial, but I would say...
do it, please do.
Well, two things. One is I used to run a first-year unit many years ago before you were a student, and we worked with, at least I brought in programs working with RADA, trying to expand the spectrum of energy that we deal with, not visual, trying to introduce people to ideas which actually were current at the time, to do with memory and so on. So there are patches of teaching, and the range is quite great. The only thing I would add to this week, and thank you, it's been absolutely wonderful, and I think that the general audiences are so receptive and generous in listening and answering. I think it's great. Yeah, it's a very special place. I mean, I would look at energy per se. What do we actually mean by energy? Because that actually affects the whole of the climate issue. And really, we're dealing with residuals the whole time. The virtual world that we live in, and we talk about virtual world, we're living in a virtual world, unless you include quality. And, that comes from an understanding of energy itself. Right.
I saw an amazing film this week in the event you guys organised by someone who started out by saying, I don't like data and, I don't get any science. And the whole film was a kind of strongly ecological proposition that was intensely scientific in its way. So I think we have a really narrow view in architecture of what science is. It's something to do with graphs. and equations with some funny shaped lines in, and that's the dumbest view in a way. That's most scientists would look at you if you say that and say, well, yeah, you're fundamentally misunderstanding, and it doesn't matter if the method you want to explore it is in film. In my case, I ran a intermediate unit for 5 years working on ballet and worked with choreographers and things. It doesn't matter what the media that you work in is, that you can explore what might seem very, very difficult and obscure territories. You can explore them, in many, many different ways. And eventually you will learn one formula, and you can tell your mum, look, I understand physics. But you are making, people are making their own.
There is something that I wanted to, we were just talking about it with Mike, and I want to take a time, almost like a time travel back to when our current director, Ingrid Schroeder, was kind of at the stage of being elected. And one of the questions that was raised in that Q&A was, what do you think one of the biggest risks that AA is facing and is yet to face is? And she identified it as being us secluded from the outside world. And this resonated a lot with many of the students, and I think this was a big conversation also afterwards, and how not just as AA students but also as architectural profession we need to make sure we touch base with other disciplines. And when we're talking about interdisciplinary, it's a word that is a lot spoken in AA, and working across units, and these are all things that we want to do, but hopefully this is like only the beginning of us trying to do that and somehow have that network a bit more grounded, because I think that is the only way that we can really move forward.
Who's got a mic? I'm going to take it. Okay. Sorry, what was it? Yeah.
Thank you. I just have some very quick thoughts. Well, before this week, I obviously knew that climate is changing, but now I know that the architecture discipline as a whole is definitely going to change, whether we like it or not. Just like Wolf mentioned, like last night, with his blank sheet of paper, we are kind of have to going to reinvent everything within architecture, and that I think something that is going to eventually happen. Another thing that I can't stop thinking about was something that Nikolai said in his presentation, that our current situation is the result of the total mobilization of humans. Everyone contributed to this, and if we are going to kind of reverse it, everyone needs to contribute as well. So another total mobilization, so everything is going to definitely change. That's something that I didn't really thought about, I didn't really knew. And another thing that was really interesting about Nikolai's presentation was that's something that he did. He was working in a more classic architecture discipline, right? But now he's doing something that's something that I can't stop thinking about. Architecture is going to have a totally new meaning. Thank you.
Thanks. You're gonna respond? No, I'm not gonna. I was just gonna say. No, I was gonna. Again, it's fine. I'm not gonna go on camera. I was gonna say that I think you're right. I think someone else spoke to me about climate changes. We should see it in the same way we see the space race, like as a challenge that we can overcome if we want to do it. But yeah, there's someone else. You can.
I was going to respond to your question.
My question.
Don't know where to stand now. Somewhere. So behind the camera, that's probably a safe place. Yeah, there we go. Your general point about going further, and I appreciated your points about interdisciplinary working. And one way I think that could go further is if we consider the ways in which we collaborate and cooperate, as opposed to compete with one another, and that process of interdisciplinary interaction actually serves to build communities with each other. My suspicion is that those ways of thinking might actually give us opportunities for the kind of breakthroughs that we need and the ways in which we're trying to innovate. When I was a student at the AA, I tended to experience it as a very competitive place, quite a challenging place, and I'm sure there remains a place for competitive thinking, but I suggest that it's the collaborative approaches that we could grow in the coming months and years.
Harriet, I thought you were going to speak.
I'm just thinking about how when we graduate from school, we can like decide if we want to work like towards something that makes like the climate change like like work for something that for the like climate change. But I'm just thinking like if also like in the academy, like before you graduate, we could also like start thinking about how to integrate like instead of having like an architecture school, having like a climate change school, like where you don't only accept architects as students, but like a lot of different disciplines. And I think that would be like something interesting to think about.
Yeah, just so like it's interesting to hear you say about the School of Climate Change. Actually, I think before I came here already, and also in AA, like more tutors and students and professors, they're addressing the matter of climate week. I remember during this week's presentation, someone said our generation needs to build their own city, something like that. Guessing the climate change, the idea is already like addressed throughout the teaching, maybe around the globe. Because when I came here, I was receiving education in Australia. I remember my tutor keep asking question about do you think about the climate? Like, do you think about the ecological aspect? Yeah, and I guessing that is, they also said we're not at their generation, like they need, they build a really like fantasy houses and then don't look at the consequences. And they said for our generation, the climate change is kind of like our solution and like our problem, like our generation need to like work with. So yeah, I guessing like it is true that, and for it is true like more and more tutors and students and professors, they kind of like realize what is the issue, like what is the most important issue for our generation, and think that is why we have a week for the climate change. Yeah.
You can start by helping to change the school. If you feel strongly enough that you need to understand things that are not being explained to you, you can demand that the school does that it brings in people. And if you don't get it the first time, you can ask for a better teacher in that subject. So change starts with you guys, with you. It does. So I think it's important for that. And we don't have, the AA isn't a learned society with, amazing professors who know absolutely everything. It isn't. At its best, it's always been driven by the questions asked by students. And then we have to go home and work out how to answer it by tomorrow morning. Yeah. And that rebuilds a whole culture, that kind of attitude. Ask, demand.
Can I?
Wait,
I think one of the discussions we're having in the student forum was Climate Matters Week. And we've had this incredible, intense 5 days of purely talking about the climate and the effects and educating ourselves and building on knowledge or creating new foundations of knowledge.
but we're discussing it in a 5-week intensive. So how do we, in this school, how do we prolong that conversation? How do you make sure that we're not just talking about it once a week every year, but we are taking what we've learned and we are accelerating the conversation? And this is just kind of a catalyst for a new beginning. And it goes back to kind of what you're saying about demanding and, you know, making sure that we're pushing the conversations. And I think, you know, we also we need to like be self-inspiring to make sure we're pushing the conversations.
I completely agree, but I also can't help but think it's up to us. Like at this stage, when you're at the AA, you need to be able to go out and ask what you want to learn. It's the same, the university concept has changed with the immense kind of availability of knowledge. It's no longer the space where you go and the information is stored there physically, but it's the space where you go to kind of make sense of the information that you've like stored over the course of a few days. So AA is almost like the space where you have to come, you know what you want, you know as a person, as a student, that you have a responsibility towards climate. And it's like, I think we're beyond past the stage where tutors and professors have to come and kind of put it mandatory on us to think about these things. I think it needs to come from us almost, and we need to demand what's missing. I want to learn more about that, and let's invite this speaker. And this is being done in AA, and I think there is a strong room for growth there. So yeah, I think that's an exciting thing for the future of AA.
I also just want to add, no, I just want to, just really quickly, that it's called Climate Matters, but it's not just about climate, it's also about ecology and issues of social justice. And we have to always remember that when we talk about it. So that, although it's called Climate Matters Week, the idea was us to talk about everything. Sorry, you've been waiting.
No, it's fine. Sam sort of set that up quite interestingly, and then Kieran's just added a bit more to it. But I would like to put forward just the idea of if we didn't have this climate conversation going on, would we still be having a conversation like this? I think that's an interesting thing, because it seems to come down to what we're actually looking into, what we're researching, what we're interested in, and what our purpose is on this planet. And I would maybe guess that that's basically what everybody should be doing, whether they've got this overarching narrative or not. And just to add one other thing about the conversation, and I think there's been fantastic energy in the room, everybody involved that's pulled this through a week, which is a week. It's an amazing piece of work. But I kind of mentioned or noted, I think some of the things of people challenging the idea that is carbon the main problem, which Kieran addressed earlier in the week. Certain people, learned people, would say, well, temperature, sorry, the other way around, carbon follows temperature. Now, I don't know, but I would like that discussed, and I think it's a very important part to knock it on the head or discuss it. What the sun's part in all of this is as well. And I think these are important conversations to be having in a more open form, which the school is encouraging, which is very good.
I think that's, no.
Yeah, Eddie, and I think there's also a very sort of fluctuating flow that was going on in the past week that I think will extend. I mean, for me, it will extend throughout, because there were moments that I felt super hopeless about this, because it was about climate change in general. And I think I can mention it. After John Palmesino's lecture, for example, I was like, who am I to do anything about this? And then sort of next day we were here sort of stomping on earth. And then that was super hopeful. And I think these fluctuations keep happening without even us realizing, without even the climate week. But now, because we did this, it is enhanced. And we actually know what to talk about now. So, yeah.
I think it's a really lovely thing. A conversation has come, sort of feelings come out of this week that collaboration and working together is the key to unlocking all of this. And I would push that even further to say it's not a nice to have, it's actually the only way, and it's an absolute requirement. And anyone who is a student at the AA or a teacher at the AA who is still following a very outdated model that there is this sole genius who's going to come up alone with the perfect building and it's going to be in any way sustainable or contextual to a climate emergency is just wrong. And I'm really glad if that's being unlocked. And I think as students, you should keep asking to challenge that. And if you feel that you're in a studio environment where that is what's being taught, you should challenge that. So maybe I'm going in hard, but I think that it's absolutely critical. There's something else I was going to say, but I've forgotten.
Go for it. Just while you have the mic.
Just in terms of how the school needs to change and take seriously, as you suggested, and the fact that this is an absolute necessity and not a nice to have. Like, it's just always struck me as odd and disturbing that Climate Week abuts Travel Week, as it was called before that title was diplomatically changed to Unit Trip Week. But units are taking trips to Africa, to North America, and it just strikes me as really absurd. And yeah, I could use other words, but like, you don't need to go across the world to address these issues. There's enough to think about and to deal with on our doorstep. That's one observation. Another, somebody mentioned that this is like the space race, and somebody else mentioned that we're all responsible for modernization. I think that relates to the misnomer of the Anthropocene. Not everyone is responsible for the climate crisis. Not everyone is responsible for the Anthropocene or modernization. It's specifically Western capitalism. And so I think that's a huge mistake in thinking that needs to be corrected. And in terms of the space race, this is not a technocratic challenge that we're in. It's far deeper than that, and it's not going to be corrected by advanced technology. It's going to be corrected by social justice and by reconceiving what we already have and reusing and re-inhabiting what we already have. So,
just I'm going to respond to the space race, is that I'm not talking about it in technology. I'm talking about it as at a point someone said, we're going to go to the moon. Like, it was something that had never been done and at a time was inconceivable. And I think that's the same with climate change. It's something we've never dealt with climate change before, and in some ways people can't conceive it. And I think they then did it. They then put time and effort into it, and I think it's the same with climate change. If we put time and effort into it,
but can I
go on?
We're not going to solve it, okay? This is not a question of saving or not saving. We're not going to solve it. At least 2 degrees is already locked in. We're already in line for catastrophic change within our lifetimes. So this is about the difference. So that's why I found it disturbing at the beginning, people feeling like, I don't think we should come out of this week feeling only optimistic. I think we should be committed and engaged and deeply worried, but definitely not disabled and not incapacitated by fear. But we shouldn't be optimistic only, because that just smacks of kind of complacency and like, a magic bullet will come along.
No, I don't think anyone's used optimism in that sense at all. There are no magic bullets, and there's no technology, no technical devices that will stop the increase in temperature, the shortage of water, the social injustice, and all that. I think the optimism, at least that I was referring to, is the sense that as people become more aware and they know more, they will be less fearful, and they're more able to think about what's it going to be like to live here? What kind of work can I do? what kind of community, what way of living can I put forward? So I think
that kind of optimism is 100% what we need.
I think the point may have moved on now, but I just wanted to talk about collaboration and multidisciplinary kind of activity for a while, because I consider myself both of those things. I'm definitely not an architect. Okay, here I am. But I think we are inherently collaborative, and maybe the paradigm of what we name ourselves.
when you say we, do you mean humans?
Humans are inherently collaborative and inherently multidisciplinary. I believe that we are interdependent, and we like to, perhaps it's the labeling that we give ourselves, or we like to feel that we are sole agents alone, and that mostly is not true, is my view.
No, that is wild optimism. I think there's a whole section of humanity that is predatory, and
just a very small point to make sure that as the discussion proceeds, it includes New Zealand.
it's on the other side. It's on the back.
Just coming back to the comments about becoming more interdisciplinary and how that's a challenge, what do you guys think is the biggest challenge architects face in becoming more collaborative with different fields and practices?
Vocabulary. Vocabulary. Even just the lecture just before this, we had an amazing lecture, a physicist talk about fractals and how cities are made, and she was referring to communities, and me kind of reflected on the talk after briefly with Shin, and we both kind of identified the same thing about how different community can mean in science and how it can mean to architects and anthropologists. And I think vocabulary in general sense, it also just came up with the energy. Someone mentioned how we need to make sure that we define energy clearly. And I think interdisciplinary, we need to make sure that these concepts and ideas and our stances that we inevitably take through linguistics do not get lost in translation.
Yeah. No, on that note, I totally agree with the idea of the vocabulary. And I think one of the urgent tasks of our community is to challenge some of the words and terminologies that we use to better understand our position. We constantly, in dealing with climate matter, we constantly use inclusive and passive sentences. We do that. We are in this, but we are not in this together. Every person has a different impact. Every person has a different liability. Every person, every catastrophe, every, let's say, radical changes in the environment, in different geography, has a different cause and has a different impact. So in a way, collectively, trying to decipher and a bit, let's say, politicize this kind of seemingly apolitical language that we are using could perhaps help to see the changes, to see the weight of some of these responsibilities that we have, and probably also using our expertise better and prioritizing the field that we can be much more operative in. And I must say on the positive side, as architects, we have an active engagement with environment. So we design, we decide, basically. So that's our tool, and this needs to be part of our active engagement. But knowing where to engage with and what to engage with, perhaps this kind of differentiation of the terminologies and the concept that we are using needs to be a bit much more scrutinized.
Just one sentence. I think it's also super important that we shouldn't think about collaboration as a means of alleviating individual responsibility in climate change. I think it's great, collaboration is great, but it should not be somehow the psychological escape to the burdens that we may feel individually, but instead we have to be courageous enough and to face them individually and then resort to collaboration on a more problem-solving manner.
I was thinking I mean, of course, we're students, but still, I feel like the profession currently is in a transition period where you can't just see the world as a blank slate, which was also the discussion, part of the discussion yesterday. I think you can't see the world as a blank slate and then just do a massive master plan and then just demolish everything. And then this transition to see the alternatives to not build on blank land and then just how to incorporate what we have exactly. So currently I feel like the techniques that are being talked about are not developed well enough, and then I'm personally quite excited to push further how else we can do the transition. Yeah.
This also connects very well with the vocabulary, because we talk about using local resources, working with people, connecting back to the community and building with the community. But what do we do if we can't communicate with the community? What do you want to do, sort of? What's this intermediary language that we need to form now?
Maybe we should lose the opinion that it's our vocabulary that we should teach to the rest of the world. And maybe Hamid's point is that we become more conscious of how other disciplines and other people use particular words. And that would be a good place to start, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and also diagrams, like that's it.
Diagrams?
The diagrams and sort of getting out of, like, I need to be able to explain to my aunt my diagram without speaking a word, sort of, in the simplest way. If anyone has any suggestions, let me know.
And I think on top of vocabulary, on top of diagrams, I think habits, I think we need to adopt new habits in the school. And, you know, I'm a student, some of you are teachers here, and some of you are very modest, that we're part of Material Arcade, but we've not said a single thing this whole time. But, I mean, developing new tools, I think Material Arcade has been such a big initiative in the school and giving you a platform to not only just get new materials that you know are reused, but also a platform to develop it further. I mean, we had a workshop this morning, and I'm going to tie this back to new habits, but we had some models that were like lamentable, like doused in the glue and quite frankly unkind in the way that you have to think who's going to be able to reuse this, who's going to be able to even dispose of this. And I think all of us here as a community let's just, you know, pick up new habits. Let's just sharpen our tools together. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can also say that collaboration. I got it's getting nights from all over. Collaboration is an individual act. It takes the letting go of, you know, my idea, my big thing, you have to let go and trust others and trust a collective approach to things. And I think for a long time, architecture has had a hard time letting go of my idea. And that's a challenge. That's a value system that we need to adapt to, as well as being healthier. Like just personal health leads to creativity and leads to better solutions, and not pushing ourselves to a place where, you know, you're so busy that you're going to now douse your model in glue and, you know, put something shitty into the world because you never had time to do that model in the first place. And then finally, big thanks to Material Arcade. We did. They helped us make these beautiful chairs, and their ability to reuse materials is just a great way to collaborate with, and great way to move forward as a school.
Hi. Thanks for all the interesting talks. I just wanted to mention my second year, me and another student put together a proposal that went to management to kind of create a space or like some form of talks that were, between brackets, interdisciplinary, as we touched finally on the topic of having to engage with other disciplines in a way that we can exchange and also understand their point of view and their way of perceiving and understanding, called the Open Door series. And we had, from lighting artists to kind of microbiologists, all sorts of people from different kind of professions and fields, almost anything but architects, who were supposed to come in and talk, and this got pushed because of other events and other equally interesting talks. But I was wondering whether that could be a prerogative for the school moving forward, in terms of finding a real one-on-one way to engage with something that isn't architecture, because we know that the scale of the issue, climate change, is a planetary scale problem. It touches even countries like Bhutan, which have done nothing to, or close to nothing to affect these fluctuations in the climate, and yet they find themselves burdened with all the issues that they bring, like land erosion and all sorts of degradation. So I was wondering whether that could be something that, moving forward from Climate Week, could be brought back on the table. And I'm wondering, whether that's something that you could respond to. Thank you.
Yes, I think it should be. I've spent my life arguing that we should spell architecture with a small a, not a capital, and that any arrangement of material in time and over space is architecture. And the profession of building is just a small bit of it. So yes, I think it should be. How to go about bringing about that change, I don't know. But yeah, I'm still kind of on that case.
Yeah, I just have a few technical questions. And in advance, thank you very much for coordinating this event, especially for those students. I assume it's extremely busy at time, but you have devoted this. Thank you. And just one question is, what happened to the open call for the material Climate Matters Week open call? The
exhibition?
No, there was open call for putting material, student works and things on the website, the portal, and there was not really a feedback or any kind of procedure being understood.
Well, we have them all on the walls, and that was a part of the initiative. And other workshops results were hung on the stairs, and they're going to be continued to be hung on Monday. So I think it's a matter of working with maintenance and kind of the logistics of it. But there are things that are being produced. There's a screen that's being produced collaboratively with DIP 11 and Inter 7 students. And there are quite a lot of individual things, and we've always made sure to say yes in some form. If we cannot, say, for example, have a slot for a unit, then we made sure that we have a space on one of the walls. And the first thing, I remember the first discussion that we've had with Mike, and it's also one of the reasons why we could get so devoted, all of us, was we want to be able to nail onto the walls of the AA. If you're not going to be able to do that, then it's going to be a totally different discussion and totally different atmosphere. And he said yes from the beginning, and that's what we're trying to do. So if you now have something that you want to add, it's still ongoing.
Yeah, it just
also, what was specifically, because we tried to, the open call, the drawings and the works from the open call are up at the bar and behind us. But if there is anything specific, we'd love to hear that.
No, just that's a very powerful tool that let the other part of the AA can be engaged to this kind of event. So yeah, it can be more like a guided and in advance and more like things. So that's
I mean the innovation in this, even though it's just the first and maybe it's not totally amazing, but the idea that there's no point in having an open call unless it's curated by students. And I think, we've done well enough to persuade the school that's a good idea. And I'm hoping to see something next term where what is exhibited is chosen by students, what is called for, and all the themes are done by students. But then we have to fight for which walls and which space, and yeah. So you can be part of that.
Yeah, fair enough.
You can help make it happen, which is yeah.
Yeah, and
there's no way out now.
I'm fifth year, so I'm. The second following question is about the timing. Just wanted to ask, whether this is the best time to having this kind of amazing week, because we're just starting the academic year, or it can be merged with the project review, or it can be held in the open week. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the fact that this is the first time a week like this has been organized. There were so many things that had to be discussed, and there was quite a lot of unknowns along the way. But in terms of having this week situated on term 1, we recently had a conversation in the terrace of how it inevitably caught the students when they were thinking about process the most, and they were not kind of enhancing their designs or wrapping up their presentations, but they were more maybe receptive to some new modes of thinking. So in that sense, from a student perspective, I thought it was good timing, but maybe other people have other opinions.
Yeah, my opinion was if that can be held in the later term, then all the units, we're working as a unit, so we narrow down toward the same goal, which is climate matters. So just one suggestion.
Okay, and then I'll ask you again in April, when you're fifth year and you're totally obsessed with finishing your portfolio.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the first go, and it's the first thing we tried. So, and the only week that was available to me was this week. So there's a kind of practicality to that. I'm guessing in the second term, there's a possibility to do something, and I'm trying to raise a little money so that that's entirely student-led. I hope they'll invite me, but they might not. Yeah.
I'm not sure if we have a time limit, Mike. Do we have a time limit?
No, but I think everyone needs a drink.
Yeah, everyone needs a drink. Okay. Yeah.
Do you want to close?
Sorry, just before you do, there is a small budget for drinks in the bar from 6 o'clock, and when we've spent that budget, then you'll have to start buying your own drinks.
6 minutes, it's been done already, that budget.
Should we wrap it up? Do you want to thank you? I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for joining in the discussion. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all the students who organised things. Thank you for Mike for organising it. Thank you for the AA for hosting us. Thank you to all the guests that have come along and speak. And thank you to our audio-visual team who've made sure that everything's worked perfectly online. Thank you to the graphics team who've done all the graphics for everything. Thank you for the communications teams that have been sending it out. Thank you to every single part of the AA and every person that's been involved. If I haven't mentioned you, I apologize, but thank you all very much, and we'll see you in the bar.